In late 2003, a 19-year-old student built a website in his Harvard dorm room to rate the looks of his classmates. 20 years later, that little site had turned into a company worth over $1 trillion, and it permanently changed how billions of people communicate, consume information, and form opinions. Today, Mark Zuckerberg controls Meta, the parent company of Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp, and Threads. His personal net worth? Somewhere in the $200-something billion range, one of the richest men on the planet. But this story isn't just about success, it's about betrayal. Billion-dollar lawsuits, disinformation campaigns that shaped elections, the exposure of data tied to millions of users, and the most expensive and most controversial bet in modern tech. Tens of billions of dollars poured into the metaverse, and counting. But before we go any further, subscribe to the channel and hit like to support us. Welcome to Money and Magnates. Mark Zuckerberg was born in 1984 in White Plains, upper-middle-class family. Father was a dentist, mother was a psychiatrist, and from the time he was a kid, he was completely obsessed with computers. At 12, he built a messaging system for his dad's dental office using Atari Basic. He called it Zucknet. It was basically a homemade instant messenger so his dad could talk to the receptionist without getting up from his chair. Mark thought it was brilliant. In high school, he and a friend created a piece of software called Synapse that used early artificial intelligence concepts to learn your music habits and suggest personalized playlists. Microsoft and AOL tried to buy the software. They offered him jobs. Mark was 17. He turned it all down. He wanted Harvard. And in 2002, he got in, computer science and psychology. But Harvard at the time had a weird problem. There wasn't a real digital Facebook. You know those printed student directories with photos and basic info? That existed on paper, and not every dorm even had access. So in October 2003, on a Friday night, he was bored in the dorm. He had just broken up with his girlfriend. And he had an idea. Build a site where you could compare photos of Harvard students side by side and vote on who was more attractive. He hacked into dorm systems, pulled student photos without permission, and within a few hours he launched the site. FaceMash. The mechanic was ruthless. 2 photos popped up, you clicked the more attractive one, and the algorithm ranked people. Within 4 hours, the site had 450 visitors and 22,000 photo views. Harvard's servers nearly crashed. The administration found out Saturday morning, shut it down, and put Mark into a disciplinary process for privacy violations and copyright issues. He came close to getting expelled, but FaceMash proved something important. Harvard had a huge appetite for a social network. People wanted to connect digitally, and Mark realized that if he built it the right way, legal, opt-in, with user consent, it could become something massive. So in January 2004, he started coding something new. This time, it would be opt-in. People would upload their own photos and information. It would be a digital social directory. And on February 4th, 2004, he launched the Facebook.com, exclusive to Harvard. But Zuckerberg didn't build it alone. 2 dorm friends helped, Dustin Moskovitz and Chris Hughes. And there was also his Brazilian friend Eduardo Saverin, who was basically the only one with cash available at the time. Eduardo put in an initial investment of $15,000 and became the main financial partner early on. The growth was explosive. In 24 hours, the Facebook had 1,200 users at Harvard. Within a month, more than half the school had an active profile. And Mark started expanding. Stanford, Columbia, Yale, then more schools. The rule was simple. You needed a .edu university email to join. It was exclusive. It was cool. But this is where the first major problem starts. Because about 3 weeks before launching Facebook, Mark had agreed to code a site for 3 Harvard students, twin brothers Cameron and Tyler Winklevoss, and Divya Narendra. They had an idea called Harvard Connection, a social network for college students. Mark was supposed to be the programmer. Instead, Mark stalled. He kept saying he was working on their code while building his own project in parallel. And when Facebook launched, the Winklevoss team exploded. They believed Mark had stolen their idea. The truth? It's complicated. A college social network wasn't some revolutionary concept in 2004. Friendster already existed. MySpace was growing fast. The real difference was execution, and Mark executed first and better. But the Winklevoss team felt betrayed. And in April 2004, just a few months after launch, they filed a lawsuit claiming intellectual property theft. Meanwhile, Facebook kept growing. In June 2004, Mark dropped out of Harvard and moved to Palo Alto, California with Dustin and other early teammates. Eduardo Saverin stayed in New York for a summer internship at an investment bank, but on paper, he was still CFO and still a partner. And that's when Sean Parker showed up. Parker was a Silicon Valley legend. At 19, he had co-founded Napster, the file-sharing service that nearly nuked the music industry. He was charismatic, deeply connected, and he knew how to raise money. Mark brought him in as Facebook's president, and Sean Parker changed everything. He convinced venture investors to bet big. He secured $500,000 from Peter Thiel, PayPal's co-founder, in exchange for 10% of the company. But Eduardo Saverin was in New York, disconnected from key decisions, and he started clashing with Mark. Eduardo wanted to monetize quickly, roll out ads, grow slower, and stay profitable. Mark wanted the opposite: grow fast, dominate the market, monetize later. The tension exploded, and in 2005, Mark made a brutal move. He diluted Eduardo's stake through a corporate restructuring. Eduardo went from owning a huge chunk of the company to owning a much smaller piece. And he didn't find out until it was too late. Eduardo sued Mark for betrayal and unfair dilution. The case was settled out of court. The terms are still confidential, but Eduardo kept a stake and is now worth billions. Even today, he doesn't speak warmly about Zuckerberg. And the story became one of the central threads of the film The Social Network years later.
Because I'm not coming back for 30%. I'm coming back for everything.
While lawsuits from Eduardo and the Winklevoss team were brewing, Mark stayed focused on growth. In 2005, Facebook had 5.5 million users, mostly college students. But in September 2006, Mark made the riskiest decision yet. He opened Facebook to everyone. Anyone with an email address could join. A lot of users hated it. They said Facebook would lose its exclusivity. But Mark was right. Growth exploded. By 2007, Facebook had 50 million users, and it started to become a multi-billion-dollar machine. That same year, Microsoft invested $240 million for 1.6% of the company, valuing Facebook at $15 billion. And in 2008, the lawsuits finally reached a resolution. The Winklevoss team accepted a settlement, $65 million in cash and Facebook stock. Years later, they tried to undo the deal, claiming they were misled about Facebook's true value. They lost again. To this day, it's still debated. Did Mark steal the idea, or did he simply execute better on something that was obvious at the time? Depends who you ask. In 2012, Mark decided it was time to go public, and on May 18, 2012, Facebook launched its IPO, the biggest U.S. tech IPO up to that point. The company raised $16 billion. The IPO price was $38 per share. At 28, Mark Zuckerberg became one of the youngest billionaires in the world. But here's the crucial detail most people miss. When Facebook went public, Mark structured the company with two classes of shares. Class A shares, sold to the public, carry 1 vote each. Class B shares, controlled by Mark, carry 10 votes each. That means even without owning a majority of the shares, Zuckerberg controls a majority of the voting power. He's effectively untouchable. After the IPO, Mark entered the acquisition era, and his strategy was driven by calculated paranoia. Because in 2012, he noticed something that terrified him. People were posting less on Facebook. They were migrating to a photo app called Instagram. And Instagram was mobile first, built for phones, while Facebook still relied heavily on desktop behavior. Mark realized it fast. The phone was going to kill Facebook if he didn't move. So in April 2012, he offered $1 billion for Instagram. The app had 30 million users and basically no revenue. Wall Street thought it was insane. But Mark wasn't buying revenue. He was buying survival. He was killing a threat before it became unstoppable. Then, 2 years later, in 2014, he did the same thing with WhatsApp. He paid $19 billion. the largest startup acquisition of its era. Why? Because WhatsApp dominated messaging outside the United States. If people stopped using Facebook Messenger, they stopped opening Facebook. Zuckerberg bought WhatsApp to make sure you opened one of his apps every day, even if it wasn't Facebook. And when he couldn't buy you, he copied you and suffocated you. In 2013, Mark offered $3 billion for Snapchat. Evan Spiegel, then 23, said no. So Mark copied Snapchat's core feature, Stories, and rolled it out across Instagram, Facebook, and WhatsApp. Snapchat's growth got crushed. The message to Silicon Valley was clear: sell to Zuckerberg, or he'll bury you. The strategy had a name: land grab. Capture territory. Buy competitors before they become threats. Copy features before they become the standard. Use the size of your network to suffocate anyone who refuses. But in 2016, everything started to fall apart. That was the year of the U.S. presidential election, Hillary Clinton versus Donald Trump. And Facebook was at the center of a storm no one had predicted. Fake news spread faster than real news. Extremist groups used the platform to radicalize people. Russian-linked bots bought political ads to influence voters. At first, Mark denied Facebook had any real impact. He said it was a crazy idea to think fake news affected the election. The backlash was brutal. Journalists, politicians, even Facebook employees were stunned. Days later, he walked it back, apologized, and promised changes. But the worst was still coming, and that's when Facebook stopped being just a social network and started becoming political infrastructure. In March 2018, the Cambridge Analytica scandal exploded. A political consulting firm had obtained access to data tied to 87 million Facebook users without permission. They used it to build psychological profiles and target political ads during the 2016 election. And here's the ugliest part. Facebook learned about the issue back in 2015. It took limited steps, but the scandal didn't explode publicly until 3 years later. When the story broke in 2018, the company lost over $100 billion in market value in a matter of days. It was a massacre. Mark was called to testify before Congress, and something embarrassing happened. Senators in their 70s and 80s asked questions that made it obvious they didn't understand how the internet worked. One senator actually asked, "How do you make money if the service is free?"
You said back then that Facebook would always be free. Is that still your objective?
Mark, visibly uncomfortable, replied, "Senator, we run ads." The hearing became a meme. But even with the politicians looking clueless, Mark walked away damaged. The narrative had permanently shifted. Facebook is dangerous. It sells data. It doesn't protect privacy. It influences elections. And the scandals kept coming. In 2021, a former Facebook employee named Frances Hogan leaked thousands of internal documents. The Facebook files revealed brutal realities. Instagram was measurably harmful to teen mental health, especially for girls. Algorithms amplified extremist content because it drove engagement. The company ignored hate speech in poor countries because it didn't have enough moderators. Leadership knew all of it, and still prioritized growth and profit over safety. Hogan testified before Congress and delivered a line that stuck: Facebook puts profits over people. Regulatory pressure exploded worldwide. The European Union, the United Kingdom, Australia, governments tightened privacy and platform accountability rules. And in the middle of that storm, Mark made the most controversial decision of his career. In October 2021, he announced Facebook would rebrand as Meta. The company would bet on the metaverse, three-dimensional virtual environments where people would work, socialize, and live through avatars using VR headsets. Mark started spending tens of billions of dollars on research and development. And the results? Meta's flagship virtual world, Horizon Worlds, was reported to have fewer than 200,000 active users in 2022. People weren't buying VR headsets. They weren't moving into the metaverse. Investors were furious. Meta's stock fell about 70% in 2022. Mark personally lost more than $100 billion in net worth in a single year. Thousands of employees were laid off. And the nickname Zuckverse turned into a global joke. Any other CEO would have been fired by the board. But remember that detail about the supervoting shares? This is where it becomes his superpower. Because even with investors bleeding, even with the stock collapsing, Zuckerberg can't be removed. He controls the votes. He's essentially the controlling shareholder of a public company. Wall Street can't leave without losing billions, and it can't fire him without dumping everything. So it stays trapped, hoping his vision eventually works. And surprisingly, in 2023 and 2024, Meta started to recover. Zuckerberg launched Threads to compete with Twitter. He invested heavily in artificial intelligence. He cut costs aggressively, and the stock surged back. Today, Meta is worth over $1 trillion. Mark Zuckerberg's net worth is still in the $200-something billion range. He remains one of the richest men on Earth, but his legacy, it's deeply controversial. On the positive side, he built tools that connected billions of people. Small businesses use Facebook and Instagram to sell. Families stay connected through WhatsApp. Social movements organize through these platforms. On the negative side, those same platforms spread disinformation at industrial scale, shaped elections, caused measurable psychological harm to teenagers, amplified hate speech, and, in extreme cases, were tied to real-world atrocities, like Myanmar, where Facebook was used to incite violence against the Rohingya minority. Mark Zuckerberg isn't a movie villain. He isn't a Silicon Valley hero. He's an engineer who optimized engagement so well that he broke parts of society in the process. And the question no one has answered yet is this: can you build a social network used by billions without damaging democracy, mental health, and truth? Mark is still trying to prove the answer is yes, but so far the results are mixed. The story of Mark Zuckerberg is the story of the modern internet. Unprecedented power, unlimited profit, and consequences nobody fully predicted. And it all started with a website to rate girls at Harvard. Drop a comment. Do you think Zuckerberg is a genius or a villain? And which entrepreneur should we cover next? If you enjoyed the video, hit like, subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.